Hey everyone, this is Chris, and you're listening to One Cross Radio. And today we are rejoined by my friend and yours, Nathan Marchand. Nathan, how are you doing today?
Hello, One Cross Radio listeners. And yes, Jimmy is here too.
Awesome.
He's basically my Uber driver at this point because he just built a couple of mechs a few months ago.
Right.
There were shenanigans after they were unveiled that may have involved a robot battle between me, Jimmy, Godzilla, and Kong. So, yeah. But one of them, one is Mechanicong Mark II, because he rebuilt that sucker. And then the other one is Uber Mogura, which he fashioned together from the leftover parts from both Moguras. That one I didn't know about until stuff went down. So now we use that one to fly me around when I have to make guest appearances like this. And thankfully, because I called you up and I said, hey, where can we park this thing? And you said, well, there's a dog park not too far away. And let me tell you, as much as I appreciated not having to go through Canadian customs at the airport, we still had to get clearance to fly in Canuck space and then land this thing. And I mean, they had to let everybody know, get out of here, get your dogs out of the way. We got a robot coming. You know?
I'm just going to put out the friendly rebuttal, sir. Like you're saying through Canadian customs. Have you ever gone through American customs?
I haven't had to so far.
Oh my goodness, dude. You don't know.
I've heard stories. Trust me. I have heard stories.
It's not even a comparison.
I have friends who order who live in the United States who order action figures from Canada, and it takes forever for them to get here.
Oh yeah. I went to Urbana, the missions conference back in 2012. I was at the border for 8.5 hours from 12:15 or till like 8:45. That was brutal.
Well, I will tell you, this is actually the first time I have been to Canuck Land in quite some time. Since probably high school, and that was the last time I was here was on a family vacation, and we went up into Canada in Detroit, went all the way around Erie, spent a few days in Niagara Falls, went back around to Indiana. So yes, we did spend most of our time on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls because you got the prettier falls.
We've got the good falls.
Yep, it too.
All right, so today's episode, sir, dear listener, we are jumping back into our Unmade series. And there's a reason we're doing this with Nathan, because Nathan is like the foremost knowledgeable kaiju podcaster that I know. And I listen to a couple different kaiju podcasts, and to the other ones, I mean no disrespect. I don't mean to burn y'all. Nathan is also the one I know the best. So it's like, hey, he knows stuff, and it's not an awkward time to ask, because I even asked him on this very show.
This is only my fourth appearance at this point. I'm your favorite guest, or at least I'm getting up there. I'm like in your top 5 at this point.
If coronavirus...
calm down, Jimmy. Okay, I get it. This is your first time on the show. All right, I understand that, unless you want to count the watch along, but that was kind of a dual release thing. But sheesh, man. This is and here's the funny thing. You got Jimmy here. He's just sitting off to the side while I've got my little portable soundboard here to do all the recording. He's just hanging out over there on the side and, still throwing his snarky remarks at me.
Of course he is.
He can't not be a producer. It's just how it works.
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. Oh yeah.
But yeah, so you invited me to come on to talk about these things.
Yes, we are looking at unmade Godzilla movies.
Yes.
Which there are plenty, dear listener.
There are quite a few, because we're talking about 65 years, almost 70 years worth of unmade movies.
Which is bonkers to think about.
It is.
This franchise is that old. Like, how many
Yes.
franchises are still active that are that old?
I can't think of any. I mean, the closest you could probably get is James Bond.
Yeah, Bond and Shrek, and both of those were the 60s.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I can't think of anything else that's been going that long. Unless when
At
did
least not of
Tornado?
Hollywood
Yeah,
or Japan for that matter. I mean, yeah, I'm sure if you start dinking around enough in Mexico, you're going to find, a series of movies with starring Mexican wrestlers. That is a thing.
or the British soap Coronation Street. That's been on for like forever. I
Yeah,
have no idea
basically.
when it started, but it's been
Yeah,
around forever. It
yeah,
wouldn't surprise
basically.
me if it started as soon as television was a thing.
Yes.
So actually, listeners, let us know in the comments what's the franchise that's got a similar start date to Godzilla that's still ongoing?
Yes. But all that to say, yes, you're having me on to discuss these things. I have been
Yeah,
described as the kaiju scholar,
yeah.
which I think some people want to contest. I know one or two podcasters who want to compete with me for that title. That being said, yes. But I also have to give credit where credit is due. Most of my research on this subject comes from my dear friend John LeMay, who is a gentleman and a scholar, I must say. I love John. I've been personal friends with him for several years now. He's been on several episodes of my show. Interestingly, he is one of, I think, maybe I'll be generous to say 5 people, not in the world, in the multiverse who like King Kong Lives, unironically. So,
Wow.
I know. That's why I had him on the show to defend it, because I'm like,
Yeah.
it's not good. But, but anyway, so
Is
my
there any relation
information
with him
is,
and James LeMay?
I don't know.
Okay. Just because there's a actually no, there wouldn't be. James LeMay is a Canadian artist. All right, never mind.
You can cut this, but
No,
no.
it's a shout out to James LeMay. He's awesome.
But anyway, I owe him a debt because I have been pulling from a couple of his books to compile this list for you. One is the big book of Japanese giant monster movies, The Lost Films, which just has had a new updated edition that is massive. I'm showing you right now. Yeah, see, you can't see it, but this is it.
That's a thick beefy boy.
Yeah, it's a big boy. This is almost as big as Godzilla's thighs. But anyway, and this is the new mutated edition. So, and then also he repackaged some of it with a different focus in another book that he just put out called Writing Giant Monsters, which I'm actually really excited to dive into more because I'm a writer and I love learning about the writing process for all of these films.
Nice. Yeah, and I thought I had something, but my brain farted, so there that went. And you definitely did do so much research on this, and you were telling me along the way, and that's awesome. With me, I didn't have much access, so I was hitting some YouTube videos, and then also Wikizilla and Gojipedia, and those have been tidied up because at one point there was
so much.
Oh yeah. Well, there was the long rumor.
Is totally legit now. A few years ago, it was a bit of a joke. Now it's seriously legit.
Well,
the guys, I know a couple of the guys that I've talked with them on occasion at some cons and stuff, and they have been working really hard to improve that website.
Well, for a long time there was under the Unmade section the rumored Godzilla versus the devil or Godzilla versus Satan,
which is something that we will discuss today.
Oh wow, there we go.
Because that is a thing that wanted to exist.
Right. All right, so why don't we dive in? Would you like to kick us off, or should I?
I will kick us off, because especially since the second item on this list, have fun, because it's wild.
Yeah, I'm reading that. I'm just
second one on this list is one of the most famous and the wildest in the bunch. But no, the first one I have on here, I will admit, it's a little bit of a cheat. It was codenamed Project G, but it also went by the title The Beast from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Doesn't that sound familiar? Wearing its influences on its sleeve. But basically, this was the first draft of the original 1954 film that was put together by Japanese novelist Shigeru Toyama.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great
so
pronunciation.
What?
Great pronunciation on that name, too.
I work with Japanese guys every day on Monster Island. I hope I'm getting this down. I'm still the dirty, dirty American there. But, well, not the only one, actually. There's a few others. But
the only time I've ever been satisfied with my pronunciation of Japanese names was on the recent Grave of the Fireflies episode I did.
Confess I have not listened to yet, mostly because I have yet to see Grave of the Fireflies.
It also just dropped today, and it's spoilerific. So
that's the reason I've avoided it, because I don't want. But anyway, so to get into the details of this unmade film, it has the same main cast of characters, but the story's a bit different, and also from what John was saying in his book, it's a bit spookier. So Emiko, who's the one of the main characters who's in the original film, is more proactive in this version. And Dr. Yamane is more eccentric, and he's really depressed. In fact, he wears a cape and only comes out at night in this draft. The Godzilla at different points would have, during this process, he wasn't the fictional, well, let me start that over. He wasn't the dinosaur that we all know and love. He was actually at one point going to be a walking whale, a lizard with floppy dog ears, or a giant octopus.
I'm picturing some later kaijus, like I'm picturing King Caesar mixed with a blue whale.
Yeah. And you'll notice a bit of a pattern, because Eiji Tsuburaya had this thing for octopuses. They kept wanting to show up in everything, and he only got them to show up on a few occasions, but he really liked them giant octopuses.
It's like him and John Peters with the obsession with we gotta have a giant mechanical spider.
Yes, just about. So here's the interesting thing, though. It does have shades of Shin Godzilla, with the Japanese government doing nothing until Godzilla comes ashore and causes damage. Mm-hmm. And also, like I said, this draft wore its influences on its sleeve. It also has some similarities to The Beast in 20,000 Fathoms, with Godzilla attacking a lighthouse. And there are scenes. This is interesting, and this almost made it into the final film. Mm-hmm. They actually did film some shots where this happened, but they ended up getting cut. There are scenes of Godzilla eating cattle and other monsters. In fact, if you dig around the internet enough and look in the right sources, you will find a photograph of a special effects scene where there's a cow half hanging out of Godzilla's mouth. It's actually really interesting, but they left that out.
In a weird way, I'm kind of glad that they did. The other monsters, especially, just because, don't get me wrong, the other kaiju play an important part of Godzilla. But in that first film, I like that he's, it's solo.
Well, if I remember right, when I wrote down other monsters, it's just smaller creatures that he's eating. They're not really the focus. They're just there to get eaten. The Mega Neuron or Mega Nulon, however you want to say it, in Rodan. You know, the bugs that you see at the beginning. They're like, oh my gosh, these are terrifying. And then later, guess what? They're just snacks.
Right.
For Rodan.
I'm thinking of the sea lice thing almost from
Godzilla. Return to Godzilla. Yeah.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. Which those will start showing up in a lot of these drafts as we go too.
Yep. Because it's got to be sea lice.
Mm-hmm. So basically, that's really all there is to say. It's the first draft. A lot of stuff got kept. A lot of stuff got refined. Obviously, Dr. Yamane was more of a wizened scientist. He was less eccentric. He didn't wear the cape. I think a lot of this stuff probably would have detracted from the sort of movie I think they wanted to make. It would have made it too pulpy, I think, and I don't think it would have become the classic that it is because it needed to be more grounded.
Oh yeah. Well, some of this stuff as I'm reading it, it reminds me of they released it in a novel, I think, but then also in a trade paperback comic. The original screenplay that Lucas did for Star Wars. And it's so different where it's like it's crazy interesting, but at the same point you're like, this wouldn't work. Like we would not be where we are.
I would be curious to actually read the screenplay itself. I've read the comic book series that was inspired by it, and the comic book series was weird enough.
Yeah, it's just those differences. So this is something like, just because we're talking Unmade, I'd be curious to see this if they ever, like, I doubt Toho would do it unless they lean in on the like, hey, let's just, because they're going into a Godzilla verse or whatever they're calling it, and at points they've been like, hey, once a year, twice a year, we're gonna get something out. It's like, hey, drop this on a streaming service on a DVD, or drop it in a comic book form. Just be like, let's see what this, almost the Elseworlds stories kind of thing. I'm a big fan of those. So.
I wouldn't be opposed to this existing, but kind of like the Star Wars, the Dark Horse comic with the Star Wars movie. Put it out there so people can see what could have been, acknowledging the fact that this is not as good.
Oh yeah, no. Like, could you picture like a walking whale? Nah.
Well, that actually goes back to the fact that the Japanese name for Godzilla is Gojira, which is a portmanteau of the Japanese words for whale and gorilla. Mm-hmm. So some people will kind of transliterate the name, I should say, as something like the whale that walks upright like gorilla or something like that, or walks like gorilla.
I'm just like, I'm picturing the amazing Tokyo burning scene, and you just got this whale kind of like trying to hop around on it.
Fire-breathing whale.
And it's just like, okay, yeah, no.
And honestly, if you really want a giant octopus movie, just watch It Came From Beneath the Sea.
Right.
Although that one is technically a septopus.
What's a septopus?
Just because it doesn't have 8 legs. That was a mistake on the special effects.
Okay. Wait, so how many? 6? 7?
7. I think it's 7. Although I've heard some people say it's actually a sextopus because it has 6, not 8. I don't know. I haven't watched that movie since I was in high school, so.
That's fair. All right, I'm gonna hop on to the next one, and you are absolutely right. This is incredibly bonkers, even by title alone.
Yeah.
So,
and I will preface it by saying this is one that actually does exist in some form now. I will explain it. And I have a bit of a connection to it, so continue.
This, as you read this, you're just like, okay, this screams the 60s. I'm feeling
this was right after Godzilla Raids Again, so we're talking late 50s.
Right. As I'm reading this, I'm just like, I'm getting Batman, the Batman series vibes, the TOS vibes. I know. All right, so listener, I'll get to reading about it. This is called Bride of Godzilla. Because what?
With a question mark. That is actually part of the title.
With a question mark. So,
yes.
Bride of Godzilla. So this was a planned third Godzilla film written by actor and aspiring screenwriter Hideo
Unagami.
Unagami,
yes.
Thank you. It was so crazy that fans thought it was fake until it was revealed that it was real in 2010. Prehistoric monsters emerged from an underground cavern. You put in your notes like the Hollow Earth, and that's something that keeps cropping back up.
Yeah, well, it's in the Monsterverse for sure.
Oh,
and and there is a small entrance to the Hollow Earth on Monster Island, so
there we go.
We have to keep a close eye on that one.
So a scientist creates a giant naked lady robot to fight the main Godzilla.
Naked as in like a Barbie doll.
That makes it even weirder.
I'm just making sure you understand what we're talking about. Or maybe Ghost in the Shell. Maybe that's another comparison I could use.
Like, are we talking like a Barbie doll that looks like Mechagodzilla almost? Like,
no,
without the. Pardon?
It was an actual woman.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a lady robot that looks like a giant robot Barbie doll.
Wow. Okay. So they've got this giant lady robot to fight these monsters and Godzilla. The robot woman's name is Eve. It also has mermaids who fight a giant octopus.
I told you.
What drugs were involved in this?
What?
What drugs were involved in this?
I don't know, but it must have been good stuff. By the way, Tomoyuki Tanaka, one of the big producers at Toho, really up until like the late 90s, like the 40s to the 90s, he loved this script. He never got it made, but I think this was when he's like, I really want to make this one, but he never got it made.
I want this because of how absurd it is, but
well, you do kind of get it now. So continue.
So another character named Dr. Yanai.
You skipped one.
Oh, I did? Oh, right. Yeah. Some elements like giant bugs attacking a village made their way into Rodan. And that's something that we've, like, I know we'll touch upon multiple times. Toho kind of does this, and other studios have as well, where it's like, okay, this didn't get made, but there was a part of it that we really wanted, so we'll get it in.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it's a giant spider showing up in a terrible Wild Wild West movie. For no reason whatsoever.
That movie.
All right, so another character, Dr.
Yanai.
Yanai is a Christian. His wife, Riko, was Sheeta's old flame.
Sheeta is the scientist who made the robot.
Gotcha. And Eve is built in her image.
Yeah, and his wife is Sheeta's ex-girlfriend.
Oh my gosh. There's also a robot daughter named Robosume by fans that looks like her. Riko's consciousness is transferred into the giant robot, which has the daughter's face. I'm getting the ends of Biollante vibes from this.
Yeah, I think they were going for Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah, no. It's just every once in a while I'll see something, I'm like, they're friggin' vibing from Biollante on this. So, yep, there's Dr. Frankenstein comparisons. Godzilla is described as smiling at one point. What? The bride then breaks.
No, I should have mentioned this. They brought Anguirus back for this one. They wanted to.
Yeah, and
there's an entire underground world when we're talking about the Hollow Earth cavern thing. It's very Jules Vernean. Well, no, Edgar Rice Burroughs, I should say.
The bride breaks Anguirus's jaw and rips out his throat and swings Godzilla around by the tail.
Okay. Here's where it gets really weird.
Godzilla then falls in love with her when his ray doesn't hurt her. Dr. Sheeta says a wedding is imminent because it is the foreplay of love to be beaten.
So there you go, fellas. There you go. What's the way to a woman's heart? Let her beat you up. There you go.
Don't do that.
Or apparently you have to fall in love with a woman you can't beat in a fight. That's what you need to do. So
there. Oh my gosh. Don't take love tips from this movie.
Don't.
It ends with Godzilla and the bride going back to the Hollow Earth, where she detonates an H-bomb inside her, destroying the Hollow Earth, and presumably Godzilla inside.
Yes.
Too expensive.
That's why it didn't get made. It didn't get made because it would have been way too expensive to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, as you're reading this, you're like, what is this? It was adapted into an audio drama on Kaijusaurus, and your friend Danny DeMana voiced Dr. Sheeta.
That's what I said. So there are a few of these that have been picked up, and they now exist in some form. And in this case, it was the Kaijusaurus podcast, which is, if I remember correctly, is based in Scotland. And they took 3 of these movies and made them into basically like 30, 40-minute audio dramas. And this was the third of the 3 that they made. And yes, my friend Danny DeMana got on it as Dr. Sheeta. And I actually did ask them if I could audition, but I don't think they got my message. So I wanted.
This might be the most bonkers thing I've ever read. not fully, but it's up there.
This is just a taste of what's to come, my friend. I'm not kidding you. That is probably at least in the top 5 of zaniest ones, but there's still more to come.
Oh yeah, no. This is the first time I've read it all in one go. Like, I've been aware of it, and I've been aware of bits and pieces of it, but all of it together, I'm like, what is this? My brain hurts.
Yes.
And the weird thing is, I want to watch it.
I do. So listen to the audio drama. Listen to the audio drama. It's very entertaining.
And before we move on, just because we shouted out this audio drama, these 2 aren't related to what we're talking about, but they're excellent audio dramas. I got to shout out the Carl Dutton podcast. If you look up on Spotify, I believe they're on other podcatchers as well, most others, if not all. But I found all the episodes specifically through Spotify. His X-Men audio drama is
I've listened
fantastic.
to a few episodes of that. It's actually really good.
And the Power Rangers audio drama he does is my favorite Power Rangers thing going right now. Like, it's
just finished season 1 of that.
It's phenomenal, or more phenomenal, in because you have to. But yeah, listeners, if you're a fan of either of those, check those out. Just a little content warning: there are some things that they do, and it happens with Power Rangers because also, I mean, it's they're high school students, and they don't idealize them as like paragons of virtue.
Well, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on your show, but Scorpina be horny. I'm just saying.
Scorpina be bad. And there's I'll do a little teaser for you. There's something coming in the season 2 kickoff where you're like, what? So, all right, let's move on, shall we?
Okay. So this next one is a little bit interesting. This is the Volcano Monsters. This was technically going to be an American film, believe it or not. This was an American film. Well, okay, let me start that over. You can cut this out.
Sure. I was also gonna actually. I'll wait till you're going in. So.
Okay. This eventually became the dubbed version of Godzilla Raids Again. It was made by the same studio that imported that film, which, by the way, listeners, if you don't know, Godzilla Raids Again is the second Godzilla film. It was made and released within a year of the original.
Yeah. Much like Son of Kong was, where they're like, oh, money.
Yeah, put it out there. So it was written by a guy named Ib Melchior. I hope I said that correctly. Who went on to write Reptilicus. Shout out to my MIFV Max member Damon, who was just on a recent episode of my show. He loves Reptilicus, but wow, Reptilicus. So Godzilla and Anguirus, because those were the monsters in Godzilla Raids Again, they are basically what this would have done is it would have taken the monster footage from the original movie with a little bit of new stuff, and then they would have made a whole other story around it with brand new characters. And they weren't going to be Godzilla and Anguirus. They were just going to be a T-Rex and an Ankylosaur wrecking San Francisco's Chinatown. By the way, San Francisco's going to show up a lot in these as well, just so you know.
And
here's the interesting thing. the suits from that movie were sent overseas to California for them to use. Because they were going to film a few new scenes with those suits. And the story features an old scientist, his beautiful assistant, and a jerk soldier hero named Steve McBain.
Yes, McBain.
Why are you talking about my muscles? My muscles are happy that they know you are talking about me.
Upon closer inspection, these are loafers.
And the funny thing is that is about as true to form. I don't want to call it stereotypical or cliche, but that is as trope-tastic as you can get with these things. Yep. So much so that I have co-written a kaiju novella that uses that exact same setup of characters plus a few more. But yeah, so just think about that. Godzilla would have just been a T-Rex, and Anguirus just would have been an ankylosaur. I'm a little more willing to believe that Anguirus can just be an ankylosaur because that's basically what he is. Yeah. But Godzilla is some bizarre new species of T-Rex. He can breathe fire and he has giant spines on his back. What were they thinking?
Well, and then so this one came up in some of the videos I was watching, and as I was reading about it. So the studio that was going to make this went bankrupt, and then they also lost the suits.
Yep.
And part of this also, I mentioned this on a recent Solo Quick Thoughts podcast. I just can't remember the name of it, but there was one podcast where some people were saying like, maybe Godzilla shouldn't be made by made by America because it's not their story. It doesn't impact. And they were pointing to the 2014 version as like they don't want to take the blame for the atomic bombings and blah blah blah. But I'm like, well, one, that movie wasn't passing the buck. They had established in that movie like Godzilla had existed for a long time. It's not like the 1998 one where it's like, oh no, it was France instead. Freedom fries and such.
Well, in there, okay, this will be one of the few defenses I will make of that movie. In their defense, there were French nuclear tests in the mid 90s that were making some headlines at the time.
That's
and
fair.
France is technically a nuclear power. So
no, that's fair. That's fair.
Also, Philippe Roche, one of the only thing in movie. So
well, I was going to say, I'll defend Jean Reno and Hank Azaria in that movie. How many years are we at now? Over 20 years later, I still want that spinoff. I want that spinoff with those two.
That's coming up.
All right, so. The other thing is, like where I was going with this is when I heard that, and I mentioned it on the previous episode, my rebuttal to that is like Toho from day one has been open to and wanting America to embrace this and other countries to embrace this. This one in particular, like why they were fine with sending the suits in the adaptation was Godzilla was not what he is today. He was not even what he was at the height of the Showa era yet. He was known Showa. He was known.
See, Jimmy's correcting you too.
He was known in Japan, but not really anywhere else. And if he was known, it was minorly because of the bad dub, King of the Monsters. So. Even then, like we're seeing throughout history, this willingness for other people. Later, they might be a little more guarded because of bad versions. But
so what you're saying is history shows again and again how nature points up the folly of men. Is that
maybe the folly of the states trying to adapt Godzilla?
Yes, but
they eventually got it.
I will also say, if you watch this dubbed version of Godzilla Raids Again,
oh yeah, no,
it's not great.
No, it's awful.
It's kind of terrible, but it's hilariously terrible. But it is noteworthy for being one of George Takei's first acting gigs.
Right.
And also, it has the guy who voices Yogi Bear. So, and they replaced footage of the original movie with some long lost, bizarre documentary that tried using hilariously bad special effects to illustrate basically the process of creation. That in the commentary, if you get the classic media DVD, the guy when he got to that point said that it was a documentary on unintelligent design.
Which sums up this movie.
Kind of. But we'll move on to the next one, and this one is timely. I actually had John come on my show to talk about this for a little bit, but it's really timely now.
Oh, I know, right? Because it's later this month. So this one is called Continuation: King Kong versus Godzilla.
So yes, they were going to have a rematch back in the 60s because Toho's like, we got the Kong license for 5 years. What can we do? And they're also like, holy frick, this is sold so many tickets and made us so much money. Where's that sequel?
And so, dear listener, at this point, like it's become fairly common knowledge, especially with Godzilla versus Kong coming up. But you know what? Some of you might not know. So in the 60s, 63, there was the original King Kong versus Godzilla. 62, right. It got released in North America.
63,
yeah. And I recently was able to watch the Japanese original for the first time, and substantially better.
It is.
And so that one is, I'll say I enjoy it a lot, but it's also very much a product of its time. There is stuff you will not ever see again, and rightfully so, like giving kids cigarettes or something like that.
I think that was actually, that was part of the satire, because the Japanese version of the original movie is very much a satire, and I think that was part of it.
Well, and also it's also it's weird how timely that satire was, right? Like the desperation for ratings and doing whatever you can. It's
because
like,
that was
that sounds
the beginning
familiar.
of the Japanese economic miracle when Japan's economy was booming.
Right.
So they made this movie to satirize all of that, and a big part of it was television, because television was a new thing at the time. And yeah, it's tremendous. If you get a chance, watch it.
If they don't somehow, they're bound to reference it, but I'm curious if Godzilla versus Kong is going to recreate the iconic tree in the throat shot.
I would love them to, although I've heard some other people point out, and this is actually kind of a funny observation, with how ridiculously crazy that Warner Brothers and Legendary are getting with promoting this movie. They're like, they're doing exactly what the original movie was satirizing.
Right. Well,
this irony is not lost on us.
We're still in a pandemic. There's money to be made. All right. So this sequel includes King Kong adopting a human baby.
I should mention this treatment was written by Shinichi Sekizawa, who was one of the go-to screenwriters for Toho back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The other one that you'll see this name sometimes too on this list is Takeshi Kimura. Want to point that out. Sekizawa wrote this treatment, and he wrote King Kong versus Godzilla.
So Kong adopts a human baby who survives a plane crash in Africa. He develops a psychic link with him. Godzilla's body is washed.
That's just how John was phrasing it, because basically he just follows the baby everywhere.
Right. This is something I like this part, because this is something that kind of shows up in the next Godzilla movie.
Versus Godzilla, part of it. Which was written by Sekizawa.
Godzilla's body is washed ashore in mud and put on display at a theme park. Kong follows the child when he's taken back to Japan, and roles are reversed because Godzilla is revived to fight Kong. A poison Kong decoy is used on Godzilla, and he enters the final battle by swimming through lava and emerging from the mountain. All right, that would have been awesome. They fight on Mount Aso and disappear into Pardon?
So I think it's ASO.
Aso. They fight on Mount Aso and disappear into a volcano, ending in a tie again. Or actually, no. The last time Kong technically won.
No, I can agree. I've given up. I've given up on that argument.
Oh,
It's
I
either
know.
tie, Kong won. At least you're not buying into the old urban legend that there's two endings.
Yeah. No. Well, to me, Toho said like, no, Kong won. So I'm like, I gotta go with that. I
Now
can't
they're
ignore
saying it's a tie.
it.
They can't make it mind.
And then, yeah, you noted John LeMay thinks some elements carried over into Mothra versus
And
Godzilla.
you also missed the part where Kong would have fought a giant scorpion.
How'd I miss that? Oh, yeah.
Which would have been epic, but I can tell you right now it would have been very difficult to do because, I mean, they needed 20 people just to operate the Kumonga puppet in Son of Godzilla. You imagine trying to do a scorpion? Because then you have to worry about the tail and the and the claws and as well as the legs.
So some of the psychic stuff, I don't like. I'm not saying they deliberately recycled it for later, but some of this psychic connection reminds me of what we're going to get in the Heisei era.
Well, actually, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking we might be seeing something a bit like this in Godzilla versus Kong with that little deaf girl.
Right. Yes. No, that too. Like that I'm like, oh, in the trailer. But then in later Godzilla movies, I'm like, oh, you eventually got it's like a connection.
Yeah.
And all right, so
just so you know, there's going to be a special premiere for Godzilla versus Kong on the island, and Little Gia has been invited to the premiere. So
nice. Why don't you kick off the next one, sir? Oh my gosh, we have so many to go.
I know, but I do want to say I would have actually been very curious to see this, especially with this very new take. Well, not new take, but variation on the Kong story. I would have been very curious to see that. So that's actually one I kind of would like to see adapted in one form or another. But then we get to Frankenstein versus Godzilla. So Frankenstein versus Godzilla. This is an early.
I'd also like the continuation. I'd love to see that in like animate it. Do it as an animated cartoon.
Or comic.
A comic would be nice, but if you could do it as anime, I'd love it. All right, back.
Anyway, yes, Frankenstein versus Godzilla. This is an early concept that eventually became Frankenstein Conquers the World. Have you ever seen Frankenstein Conquers the World?
I have not.
I do recommend it. It's a little hard to track down, unfortunately, but the out of print DVD has actually dropped in price. So it's only like, it's not a pound of flesh. It's more like 6 ounces maybe of flesh, so you can buy it. So this treatment was by future Star Trek.
How much is that in smackaroos?
Yeah. This treatment was by future Star Trek writer Jerry Soule, and the script was going to be by Takeshi Kimura. So we have a young Dr. Bowen, who is a character in Frankenstein Conquers the World. Yes, Jimmy, played by your favorite guy in the world, Nick Adams. You and that man crush. You know that guy's dead, right? But anyway. Oh, doesn't matter? Whatever. So, a young Dr. Bowen witnesses the Hiroshima bombing. Frankenstein's heart is seen crawling on the floor, leaving a trail like a slug and growing like a fetus.
What?
It even eats a mouse.
Oh my god.
Now, just to explain, since you haven't seen Frankenstein Conquers the World, something like this does make it into the movie. The Frankenstein monster's disembodied heart is at Hiroshima right before the bombing. It does get exposed to radiation, and it does actually start to, you don't see it on screen, but it does, depending on if you watch the dub or the sub. The dub says it was eaten by a vagabond child, and then he turned into a monster, while the subtitled version says that the heart eventually, because of its unusual properties and the radiation, grew a body and was this ragged child that would be running around Hiroshima 20 years later. So, but that was all off screen. So none of this craziness, which, I mean, I would have loved to have seen them try to do this. This honestly sounds quite horrific.
Yeah.
Like Frankenstein. Yeah, I mentioned that part. So you can cut this out. So after he becomes a man, basically, he fights the military. You got to remember, he's not giant size at this point. He's maybe 9-10 feet tall. And then the military releases Godzilla from an iceberg, kind of forgetting that he has been in an iceberg for a couple of movies, but whatever. And agitates him to get him to fight Frankie. That's how I put it in my notes. Fight Frankie, because Frankenstein's on the island and we call him Frankie. Frankie takes Sueko, who's one of the other characters who does make it into Frankenstein Conquers the World. Oh, crap. I forgot the actress's name because I was going to make a joke with Jimmy, but I can't remember the actress's name. He takes her captive and protects her like he's King Kong.
Yeah.
So that's just some of the some of the things that happened in this movie. No one is sure why it didn't get made, but it was a decision by the American investor because... You need a second?
You can keep going. I'm just trying to let Luna in. She just walked up to the door and just started squeaking.
Okay.
Hi, Loons. Hi.
Oh, yeah, nice doggy.
She needs love.
Yeah. Anyway, because this was one of 3 movies that was being produced by Henry G. Saperstein, and he was investing in it. So it was one of those 3, Frankenstein Conquers the World. The other ones being Invasion of Astro Monster or Monster Zero and War of the Gargantuas. So it was the Americans who decided we don't want to do this script. And they wanted to focus more on the Frankenstein boy idea, and they thought having Godzilla in this would distract from it.
You know what? That's kind of fair. As you're making this, you're not making the pitch, but as you're reading the pitch, I'm just kind of like, this sounds more like a Frankenstein movie with Godzilla kind of not shoehorned in. He fits in a little bit more than that, but it's still like, this ain't a Godzilla movie.
Yeah, and when you watch the final film, there is the kaiju Frankenstein, and he got replaced with a brand new monster named Baragon. We call him Barry on the island, affectionately. But we have to keep Frankie and Barry separated. They really don't like each other.
Oh, that's fair. And so now we come to a movie where a title got used later.
Yes.
In the Millennium era. It's like, oh, that title's really good. Let's use it.
You'll see it a couple of times, actually.
Yep. So this one is called Two Godzillas! Exclamation point. Tokyo SOS! Exclamation point.
Yes.
So it's an early draft of what became Son of Godzilla. It was written by a woman named Kazue Shiba. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I can't remember her name now suddenly, but this was funny. For years, I did not know about her. And I thought that most of us in the fandom thought that the first woman, and at that point, the only woman to write a Godzilla film was the woman who wrote Terror of Mechagodzilla. Her name is, unfortunately, but
that's something that still gets shared as a
but apparently you have her. As you read through these notes, you'll understand why I think she probably gets overlooked. So
that's fair. And also, I guess you could be like, if you wanted to be, well, the fact is, the Terror of Mechagodzilla got made. But anyways.
Yes, Jimmy, that's the sort of thing you would remind me.
All right, so Godzilla and his son terrorize scientists building a weather control device on an island before attacking Tokyo.
That's very similar to Son of Godzilla. As that same basic premise is in Son of Godzilla.
Well, and that's the thing we're seeing throughout this. Like, if one thing doesn't get picked and put into the movie that it morphed into, so many of these things eventually get used.
My apologies for the typo on the next bullet point. It's Psycho.
Psycho. Okay.
Or in the dub, her name was changed to Rico. So
The reason I'm laughing is just because I instantly thought of Friends, where they see the commercial where Joey's doing the commercial for Japanese men's lipstick, Ichiban. At the end, Ichiban lipstick for men. It's Saiko.
but no, I trust me, I listened to that movie subtitled very closely, and that is actually how she pronounces the name. And I think that's why they changed it. Because it sounds like a terrible pun in English.
Yeah. All right, so Psycho, aka Rico, is in this, but she isn't a jungle girl. She is the daughter of a scientist who creates the weather control device.
So
The island
did carry over.
Pardon?
I was just saying, so a character did carry over.
Right.
Now that's sort of in the final movie because she was. She's a jungle girl, but she's not an island native. She was actually Japanese, and her father and her were there when she was little, and her father died. She's been surviving on the island for 10 years.
Right. Sorry, I'm just closing the door a little bit.
That's okay.
Okay. Right, sorry, I'm just picking up where I left off. Okay, so the island is evacuated halfway into the movie because of a volcanic eruption, moving the action to Tokyo, where the weather control device is used to neutralize the monsters with a tsunami. The budget on this, like as I'm reading this, I'm like, I can think of many reasons so far why this ain't.
Yeah, probably. But something like that does happen in the movie because the weather control device does get used, but instead of it being a tsunami, it makes it snow on the island. So basically, Godzilla and Manila go into hibernation.
Right. So then, Godzilla Jr. is a more serious monster compared to Manila. Godzilla is the antagonist again, though.
Yeah, because at this point he was making his transition to being the hero.
Right.
They made him more antagonistic in this.
Right. And I'm also on the record of being much more of a fan of Junior than Manila. Not to shade on Manila. I appreciate Junior more.
Junior and Manila get along fine on the island. Just saying.
Good.
Kind of weird brothers
from different eras.
Yeah. It's a little confusing.
So, yeah. So there's a scene where the scientists climb on rocks only to discover it's Godzilla's dorsal plates. You know what? That sounds like a really cool scene.
Well, you kind of got it in Godzilla versus Megaguirus.
That's fair. And
there's a scene in a Godzilla novel from the 90s by Mark Saraceni where that happens, sort of.
And it immediately made me think of the unmade American Godzilla movie before the 1998 one, but then also the early parts of 2014's Godzilla, where they're not in Godzilla, but they're in the. Are they they're in the dead Muto or the dead? One of the.
Early on, they find a hollowed out husk.
Yeah.
The idea being that there was a creature inside there that was killed by the Muto because they're parasites.
Right. Yeah.
And then I guess the idea was that that it kind of incubated there for a while and it got loose.
Right. So this was scrapped due to too many.
No, you forgot a point.
Oh, right. Yes. An early scene had Godzilla and Junior hunting clams.
Big old clams and eating them.
Sounds thrilling. It could be. Like I shouldn't poo-poo on it. This was scrapped due to too many underwater scenes, which were, especially at the time, difficult to film.
Yeah.
And the lack of a monster
they learned some hard lessons with Ebra, Horror of the Deep, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster. Those were difficult to do.
And the lack of a monster versus monster climax, which, especially at the time, I can understand. Because, by that point, it was Godzilla. Like, the Heisei era gets nicknamed the Versus era.
Hey, say, he
I
says.
knew it. I knew it as soon as I said it. I was like, I'm gonna get it from Jimmy. Jimmy, I'm sorry, I got it right earlier. And then I dropped the ball here.
I am not my producer's keeper. I'm just saying.
My bad, Jimmy. My bad. Apologies. Yeah. So at that point, like, you're not gonna get a non-monstery ending. So I understand it, but I'm not the biggest fan of Son of Godzilla.
It's all
uh,
right.
yeah, but there's parts of this where I'm like, you know what? This is one where I'd be like, yeah, you know what? Comic book form, like
Yeah.
a comic, or I don't know if I'd want it, and like, because I love the comic book medium, but there's some where I'm like, you know what? I don't know if this would necessarily work as an anime, but a comic, I think a comic would capture this really well.
That is the perfect transition to our next one, comic.
Exactly.
I
So,
almost want to give this one to you. I almost do, but I'll do it. I'll keep going.
Right,
But this might be, at least nowadays, I mean, Pride of Godzilla is a really well-known one, but this might be the most popular one.
Oh, yeah.
This whole list now.
Oh, yeah.
And that is, yes, people, this almost existed. Batman meets Godzilla. And to make it even better, it was developed by the team that made Batman 66 and would have featured the Adam West Batman.
Yep.
Also, Robin and Batgirl and Commissioner Gordon.
I wonder if they would have lifted the restrictions they had on Batgirl not being able to really kick.
Probably. Japanese aren't gonna care.
Yeah, no, that was
actually probably would have been an American film, but
that was a restriction I learned about. They're like, no, you got to make Batgirl very, very feminine, and you can't have her kick or punch like Batman and Robin do. So it's got to be these light little kicks. And I'm like, really?
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
1960s TV censorship is silly.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so there's a bit of a complicated backstory to this thing. There has been a 38-page script by Sekizawa, but no one knows if he for sure wrote it. It would have been written 2 months before the show premiered, although some people say it could have been known by the people at Toho. And for what I understand, when the show got imported to Japan, it was popular.
Well, that show was incredibly popular world over. Like, as much as
5 minutes.
like, as much as, like, love hate's the wrong word, but for a while, because I'm like, and I still have some bones with it, because as much as I dig it for what it was, but that's still what people think of when they think of Robin. I'm like, no, Robin's such a great character.
Except it's not the show's fault that it's actually true to the comics as they were at that moment. Okay, there's a whole slew of other reasons why that show was the way it was that we are not going to get into, because
I can't fully blame the show, but it's like Super Friends. Super Friends was a terrible show, but how long did it take for Aquaman to get out of the stupid Super Friends?
Yes. Anyways, the primary source for this thing is actually a treatment by a producer on the Batman 66 show, William Dozier. So William Dozier, there you go. So, you know, and there's some discrepancies between the Dozier treatment and the so-called Sekizawa script. But basically those are the two primary sources for this. It does not, believe it or not, it does not involve any of Batman's rogues gallery. It involves a new villain whose name is Klaus Finster.
Which, I love that name automatically. I'm like,
it is a good name.
I can't think of and I'm trying to rack my brain to think of, like, was it
sounds
any
very
movie I've ever seen, has there been a good guy named Klaus? I can't think of one.
Which is funny because I have a friend who is now, his whole family actually is now in New Guinea, doing work with Wycliffe Bible translators, and his last name is Klaus with a K. And he told me for years he wanted to be able to name a son Klaus with a C, just so there could be a Klaus. His wife said no.
Probably for the best.
They had a child.
Probably for the best. But it's still though. Great. Okay.
But anyway, so Klaus Finster has a weather control device, and he also controls Godzilla, who is mentioned to have last battled Kong. Commissioner Gordon, Batgirl, Batman, and Robin are all in it, like I said. They defeat Godzilla by distracting the lonely kaiju with a quote-unquote Godzilla mating call and a quote-unquote dynamite blow to the head after climbing him. Batman does this before shooting Godzilla into space in a rocket. So I'm guessing someone just saw the first camera, and then the board of directors saw this and said, "Hey, why don't we put that in this Nate guy's contract? Then in case he violates it, we shoot him into space." It was also probably seen by Joel Hodgson and all the guys at MST3K, because that's exactly what happens in MST3K.
That's so good.
Anyway. There are lots of crazy set pieces, like Batman and Robin fighting sumos on a train,
right?
Running naked through a bathhouse, but still wearing the cowls to honor tradition. Yes, Jimmy, you told that story already. Yeah, you did that once. And Bruce and Dick fighting samurai kabuki actors.
Oh my gosh.
Batman gets infatuated with... excuse me, I'm going to back this up. That note is incorrect. That it's not Batman, it's supposed to be Godzilla, so you can cut all of this out. Godzilla gets infatuated with Batgirl at one point, and Batman deduces that he appears once every 5 years to find a mate. One ending even had them defeat Godzilla by making a giant female robot Godzilla who is carried off into the sea by Big G. Apparently, they also read the Bride of Godzilla script.
I think it's just the 60s where the solution was space and sex.
Oh, you like this? Okay, fine, Jimmy. Fine. Thankfully, you tend to solve things with space. Just the last scene has Batman, Robin, Bruce, and Dick. Yes, you read that correctly. All at a baseball game, but the last two have contracted laryngitis. They're revealed later to be robot doubles. Which sounds... Actually, I think that's been done on occasion in the comics. For Batman and Superman, I think.
All right, this is bonkers.
Just when you thought Bride of Godzilla was nuts.
This is a different kind of bonkers.
Yeah. So, here's the crazy thing. It was scrapped because interest in the Batman show was waning at this point. Although some people think that this may have eventually led to the movie that was made as a tie-in to the show.
I haven't read about that, and I've read a lot about the...
They think it might have. They might have just because they were like, hey, we need to make a movie. Oh, right. What's one idea we have for a movie? How about we have Batman fight Godzilla? Ooh, that's a great idea. Oh, that's not going to happen? Okay, we'll do something else. That's sort of a thing. However,
some days you can't get rid of a bomb.
No, you can't. Unless you have bat spray shark repellent.
Yep.
However, this does exist.
It does.
It's a fan comic. And I have interviewed the creator on my show.
We live in a golden age.
Yes. The first 2 issues are out, and issue 3 be out this summer.
Nice.
And some of those set pieces are in the comic. They do fight sumos on a train. Now they do change some things and expand on some things. They dropped. You might be disappointed. They dropped Klaus Finster.
Oh man!
But they used an actual Batman villain who was not on the show, but they kind of did their own little, like Batman 66 interpretation of him. They replaced him with Hugo Strange.
I was gonna guess that it was Hugo Strange. I was like,
replaced him with Hugo Strange.
That would have been all about control Hugo.
But he was never on the show. So
no, he wasn't.
Yeah. So it's like a Batman 66 interpretation of him, and it hasn't quite been revealed yet. But like I said, I interviewed the creator, and if you haven't heard that episode, you should go listen to it, Mr. Cook.
I will.
He is in cahoots in the comic with Red Bamboo, the terrorists from Godzilla versus the Sea Monster.
Yeah, this is one I want.
It exists. It exists. Go on the website. You can read the first 2 issues for free.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, keep up the amazing fan comic. I went on the website. I didn't get the chance to read it. But I did see it, and I was like, I'm in for it. But this is also something I'd love to see in animated form. Although now,
without Adam West, it's not going to be the same.
Exactly. I was going to say
those other 2 Batman 66 inspired movies were very fun, but it's because they still had Adam West.
Yeah, they were incredibly bonkers.
William Shatner's Two-Face, baby. That made me happy because I'm going to be honest with you, Shatner could have done Two-Face back in the 60s. It would have been great.
Shatner is so underrated for his comedy. Like his comedic chops are just outstanding. He almost, if doesn't fully steal the show in Airplane 2. If he doesn't fully steal the show, he makes every moment of his limited screen time just outstanding.
I have seen that man rap Shakespeare.
Because of course he did.
Watch the movie Free Enterprise. He raps Shakespeare.
Because he's William Shatner.
He also tells one of his fans while he's being bullied, because he's an illusion. It's in the kid's imagination. He's getting beat up for showing up at school wearing a Starfleet uniform from TOS. And he's getting beat up, and it's partly because he was wearing that. And then Shatner's like, "What are you doing, kid? This isn't worth it. It's just a TV show." Okay, fine. Why is the kid beating you up? And he said Han Solo could beat Captain Kirk in a fight. And then Shatner has this really long pause, and he looks at him and says, "Go kick his butt." I'm censoring it for the kids, but that's basically what he said.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna carry us on because we got a lot to go through.
Yes.
A lot to go through, and we're on a time crunch. So the next is Lost Filmation Godzilla series and movies. So these were failed attempts.
Just give a little bit of background. Filmation was involved with making the King Kong show. Oh, no, excuse me. That would have been Rankin and Bass. But they were an animation studio.
Right. So it was failed attempts at making animated spin-offs for Destroy All Monsters.
No, after Destroy All Monsters.
After Destroy All Monsters. Sorry. Their model would have seen the King Kong show. Would have been the King. I just can't read or words.
That's because you're Canadian and you say things wrong. But
oh, sir.
It's been, not bean.
Listen.
I'm the dirty American, okay?
Just because y'all are traitors to the crown and for some reason don't go by miles and don't use the metric system.
Hey. You're not part of the British Empire anymore either. It just took you longer.
We still honor. We have universal health care. Anyways. You're not gonna lose your house going to the hospital. Moving on.
This is the most political I've gotten on a podcast in a while, and I'm not even the one bringing it up.
Yeah. Anyways,
but yes, you've established before you enunciate like a Brit. It's okay.
This would have been a series and 2 compilation movies. It was scrapped because Latitude Zero underperformed, and Toho rushed All Monsters Attack, aka Godzilla's Revenge, to have a New Year's movie. And you added that John LeMay theorizes that some elements might be in that film, like Manila's size changing.
Mm-hmm. Because there's some stuff kind of like that apparently in some of the ideas they were kicking around for these.
And
but
so
is that, you know how there are animes that will do compilation movies where they take either whole episodes or excerpts from episodes and kind of edit them together into a movie? That's basically what this would have been. It would have been a TV show, and then they would have edited together some movies and put them out in theaters.
So it would have been a cartoon version of Gamera Super Monster.
Don't remind me. I'm still stuck in the year of Gamera. Not looking forward to that one.
It's yeah, I don't want to park here too long, but I'll say, like, so far, and I got to give it another shot. I do. I wasn't that infatuated or thrilled with the Godzilla anime trilogy, but I've heard better things, so I do want to give it another shot.
Listen to my episode on it. You might have a deeper appreciation.
I've listened to your episode. I've also listened to Bex's episodes, which you were on.
Those were great. Those were the nicest podcast episodes I heard on that trilogy. Because we all liked it on that show, and we were very nice to it. And more people need to be nice to the anime trilogy.
Well, that's the thing. I'm not trying to bag on it. At times I'll be like, something's bad, and then I'll be like, you know what? It just didn't connect with me. It just might not have been for me.
There are no bad Godzilla movies. There are just ones you don't like.
I don't know if I go that far.
It's a mantra that some people have floated around in the fandom, and I kind of like it. But
I like it. I'll agree with it for the most part. I just don't know if I'd ever be like, Godzilla's Revenge.
Watch it in Japanese. It is so much better.
That's fair.
It is so much better, and if you know the context, the cultural context for it, it enhances it quite a bit. And honestly, I have a justification for the stock footage, but that's an episode for another time.
That's another episode. So far, the only thing I'd say that's been Godzilla in a cartoon or animated form that I've thoroughly and continually enjoy is that late 90s series based off of the terrible Godzilla 1998 film.
Which we'll talk about a little bit because we got one of those coming up.
I know, and that's actually, we'll get to it, but that's one we'll
save it for when we get to it.
All
right,
I will.
Especially since we're getting to spoiler warning. This is one I really, really want to see exist at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how it exists. I want it to exist. The title doesn't sound all that interesting, but once you get into even just a handful of details I have here about it, it is amazing.
Right.
So, Godzilla versus the Space Monsters. This is one of 2 dueling drafts of a script that eventually became Godzilla versus Gigan, which is not my favorite Godzilla film. It's high on my list, but it is the one I will champion the most because it is in my opinion, one of the most underestimated movies in the entire franchise. Fight me. This one was written by Kimura and does have similarities to Sekizawa's draft, which was called The Return of King Ghidorah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Sekizawa's that was ultimately chosen. They went with his script, and then He made some modifications to it, took some of Kimura's ideas and put them in there, which is why I am shocked Kimura didn't get a screenwriter credit on this. And I think that's ultimately what made Kimura just quit the screenwriting business, because he basically disappeared after this.
Yeah.
So I think he's like, fine, you're not going to use my script. You're not even going to give me credit because the other guy took some of my stuff. Screw you. And yeah, because Kimura hated Toho. It's like, you're a job, but I hate you. So yeah, but that's a whole to do. Danny DeMann and I did a presentation on Sekozawa and Kimura at G-Fest. It's on my podcast YouTube channel. Go watch it. All right. Nice. So this script featured a monster called Majin Tuol, who was like Daimajin. You probably haven't seen Daimajin, the Daimajin trilogy from Daiei. I did some episodes on it last summer. Yes, Jimmy, you got beat up by Daimajin. That was funny. Yeah, but anyway, those are movies set in feudal Japan, and Daimajin is a statue that comes to life.
Right.
Okay. So we also have quote unquote Megalon. The only details we have about Megalon is that he has eyes on the ends of antennae. That's it. And the main villain of this movie is an evil alien brain. Yes, I just said that, named Miko, and he tries to conquer the world using TV propaganda. Well, he even says at one point he does not want to cause damage like Godzilla and Anguirus, because they are in the script, do while fighting the other monsters. So he tries to turn humanity against Godzilla and Anguirus. And he sends human emissaries out to spread his message. And at the end of the movie, he uses Ghidorah as his chariot. And this is the moment that he reveals that he is, in fact, a disembodied alien brain.
Poor Ghidorah, man. Poor Ghidorah. Always being jockeyed by people.
Yes.
Always being brain controlled.
Yes. Gigan is in this. He appears while destroying satellites, which, interestingly, was a concept used by Mark Saraceni in his books in the 90s. And obviously, like I said, Anguirus is in it. The main characters are an inventor, a pilot, and two stewardesses, flight stewardesses, one of whom is an evil android.
Naturally.
And it takes place in Science Land, which is not an amusement park like in the final film, but a research facility. And interestingly, the name Miko is used for an alien in the video game Super Godzilla on the Super Nintendo.
Yep.
And if it isn't obvious already, the reason this didn't get made is because it would be way too expensive. I want this to exist.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah. Give me an animated version of that.
The whole concept, it's like, it's a very pulpy story with a lot of social commentary. Mm-hmm. And I would have loved to see this. It's especially interesting when you know that Takeshi Kimura was a card-carrying communist. So the idea of him writing about an alien brain using propaganda to take over the world.
Bonkers.
I want this so bad.
We live in an age where like content is just constantly being made. Do it. Just give this an animated form.
And also, I had to be brief with these notes, but John's details over what the characters and such do. It sounds like these characters would have been really fun as they're running around trying to do stuff to deal with all of this. So I'm just like the ridiculous number of monsters and just, oh my gosh, now there is a kind of a Daimajin pastiche that does make it into some Godzilla-related media, which was actually during the Dark Horse comics. There is a one-off issue that has a giant statue, a samurai statue that comes to life and fights Godzilla. I forget what its name was. I think it's like Gakido Jin or something like that. So something like Majin Tuol does show up eventually.
Always with the Majin. We've got so many more. We're gonna pick up the pace.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
All right,
Fun with this title.
This one is the run-on sentence, the movie. Godzilla, Red Moon, Erebus, Halflon, No Man's Land of the Monsters, aka Godzilla versus Red Moon. In Okinawa, Godzilla fights the angry parents, one from space, one from Earth, of a baby monster killed by evil entrepreneurs. They want Erebus because her blood has miraculous property.
Yeah, Erebus is the mom.
Gosh. It may have involved Tsuburaya. All right, Tsuburaya Productions, who took the concepts and made Daigoro versus Goliath to celebrate their 10th anniversary in 1972.
Yeah, it's Tsuburaya Productions, for those who don't know, was founded by Eiji Tsuburaya, who was the big special effects guy at Toho in the 50s and 60s. He unfortunately died in 1969, and they are the studio that makes Ultraman.
Getting a shin treatment coming up.
Yep.
But that's a different episode for a different time.
Yes, but I'm just letting everybody know that's what this is. So this would have been an interesting collaboration.
It would have been, yeah. And Ultraman's huge in Japan. Huge.
Ultraman's an institution.
Some reports claim that the Son of Godzilla suit was to be used.
And I call that thing Frogzilla because it is the ugliest Godzilla suit ever.
Oh, but now when you say Frogzilla, you're making me think of like Throg when they made Thor into a frog in the comics, and it weirdly worked. Now I'm just picture a frog, but with Godzilla's tail and the dorsal fins and atomic breath.
It happens, fan artists.
Exactly. So it was more in common with Gamera versus Baragon because it's more about the new monsters than the hero monster. It's learned
Barugon.
Barugon. It's learned that smog weakens Red Moon, so Tokyo is encouraged to pollute more. That would not fly today.
So Erebus is the mommy kaiju, and Red Moon is the daddy kaiju.
That would definitely not fly.
And Halfon is the baby.
Oh my gosh. It's learned. Oh wait, I read that part. So it's rumored to have a love. Oh my gosh! It's rumored to have a love scene between Red Moon and Erebus. But all that happens is they stare at each other, nuzzle, leave, and the baby shows up later. I'm kind of automatically glad right now this movie didn't get made because the furries would have a field day and you wouldn't be able to escape this fan art. Like, it would seep in everywhere.
You must be corrected. They would be scalies. That is the actual...
Scalies. All right, my apologies. And listener, just trust that there's people who are into in every way things that we're not ever going to talk about on this podcast. So don't Google that. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
Or if you Google it, make sure the safe search is on, but don't do it. Do yourself that favor.
Yeah. But basically, so all of that happens, but Godzilla doesn't show up until the end.
Naturally.
He just shows up at the end, basically.
And John LeMay theorizes that it wasn't made due to the ambiguous natures of the monsters. That, and I can think of many other reasons.
Well, but because the opponents in that one really aren't evil. They're not bad. Yeah. They're just like, we're just doing our thing. So, yeah.
All right, let's carry on.
Yes. So now we have... And this is, you'll notice that there's a lot of themes in this because we just mentioned that that one would have started in Okinawa. Well, we have another one in Okinawa. So here's another pattern that we see going on. This is the early 70s, you have to remember. Monsters
Okinawa
converge
was
on
really bad.
Okinawa. Showdown at Cape Zanpa. Godzilla, Mothra, and Anguirus battle a giant robot named Garugan, made by evil aliens. It's basically the first draft of Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla.
I'm like, I've seen this one.
Yeah. It was pitched by Sekizawa and written by Masumi Fukushima, a science fiction writer who helped with Matango. It was set in Okinawa because those islands had just been returned to Japan, and a 1975 World's Fair called the Okinawa Ocean Expo would take place there. So Okinawa was big at this point.
Yeah.
Hence why Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla in 1974 is set in Okinawa. The main characters are introduced on a TV show and include a journalist with a secret sword, which is basically the MacGuffin, and Nami, who is a character in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, but she is a much more urbanized Okinawan dancer in this one, as opposed to the priestess in the final film.
Right.
And she has a much reduced role compared to what she would have had in this. The alien villains masquerade as a corporation and want to... This is great. They're not trying... This is straight out of Hitchhiker's Guide. Because these aliens are not trying to conquer the planet because they're like, you have a resource we want, or we need a new planet. No. They're trying to conquer Earth so they can auction it off to the highest bidder. And the Nebulans, the cockroach aliens from Gigan, are mentioned as potential buyers.
Oh my gosh.
I love this idea. And throughout the script, it has some James Bond style set pieces, because again, that was big at the time. And there's some of that in Mechagodzilla 74. Godzilla barely appears in it, making Anguirus and Mothra the real stars. You see more of them going around doing stuff. Godzilla only appears, I think, like 3 times. Maybe.
They should have started the whole World of Godzilla thing a lot earlier, because then this could happen.
But here's what's kind of nuts. Mothra has no Shobajin in this, and acts a bit more violent than usual.
The seeds for Batra were planted.
That's coming up.
Oh, Batra's awesome.
And then Tomoyuki Tanaka put the kibosh on this because he thought Garugan, however you want to say it, was too generic. And then we got Godzilla's robot double.
Which, I dig that one. Again, as I'm going through this, it's like, well, the better choice was made. All right, so I'm going to move us along.
All right, yeah. Jimmy, I think you might want to minimize the interruptions from here on out. Just saying.
Yeah, we got a bunch of pages, and we're running low on time. All right, so, pardon?
Let's do it.
Yeah, all right. So next one is Hedorah's Counterattack and Godzilla versus Ghidorah. Is this one title? All right, so, okay. These were 2 proposed Godzilla films from Godzilla vs. Hedorah director Yoshimitsu Banno. The first would have been a rematch between the Smog Monster and Godzilla in Africa, and the second would have been Godzilla fighting a giant alien starfish spawned by pollution in Okinawa, also featuring the Okinawa Expo. The later was nicknamed Godzilla vs. Hitoda by fans.
Godzilla versus Starro, apparently.
Oh, man.
Or somebody just saw a message from space. One of the.
Banno compared it to E.T. because it featured underground aliens. It was deemed too outlandish and expensive, and the former is the inspiration for another Kaiju-saurus audio drama.
Yeah, the Hedorah's Counterattack. So I forget what they called. I think they called it something like Godzilla versus Hedorah 2 or something like that. But yeah,
Hedorah's got a lot of love, so it would have been.
And he's hardly appeared in anything. But let me tell you, as we go through this list, you will see Yoshimitsu Banno's like, I made one Godzilla movie, and I love it, and I'm just gonna keep doing stuff with that. So
let's keep going back to that. Well,
he was a little obsessed with the rematch for decades.
World of Godzilla might be the time, man.
Yeah.
They're wanting to do what, like a movie a year, one movie every 2 years. Gotta hit these. Anguirus is gonna get his time to shine, baby.
He was also, as you could tell, very, very obsessed with environmentalism, because that is every time he appears on this, it's all about environmentalism. My gosh.
Man, I really hope we get Batra back. Anyways, let's go.
Yeah. And now we come to another one of my favorites.
Yeah.
The title sounds ridiculous, but I love it.
Dude, this title makes me. I'd be like, you get my money off the bat right now. I don't have to see anything, just for the title alone.
Okay. The title of which is Japan's SOS: Godzilla's Suicide Strategy.
Like what?
Gotta love those Japanese titles. So Godzilla battles an invisible robot monster, Chameleon, who is made of special metal, making the
titanium.
Indeed, Jimmy. Maybe you should build this thing. No one would know you ever built it. You could just tell people he's in your garage and no one would know. Making the humans think. So Godzilla fights this thing, and it makes the humans believe that Godzilla is no longer the good guy. He's no longer the hero. He's turned on him. That's one of the reasons I love this. He then battles Chameleon and Gigan while blind. I will explain that a little bit more as we go. It never got beyond some log lines and a 3-page treatment by Hiroyasu Yamura. All right. So here's some of the things that happen in this movie. Aliens invade the prime minister's house and demand he sell them land in Japan. The Mysterians, anyone? Seriously? The prime minister laughs it off, and someone later suggests it was a terrorist disguised as an alien.
Huh.
I love this idea. I would actually prefer that it really was just terrorists pretending to be aliens. That would have been so interesting. The main characters are a reporter, a photographer, a scientist, and a pilot. The reporter, here's what's a little bit different, though. The reporter is a woman, and her photographer is a man. And Emmy, the reporter, is in a Godzilla 54 style love triangle with the scientist and the pilot.
Naturally.
So there's great drama for you right there. Gigan is mysteriously resurrected because he died in Zone Fighter, which was an Ultraman style TV show that Toho was producing at the time, that actually had Godzilla and King Ghidorah show up in it.
Oh, snap. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. Good luck finding it, though. It's never been released.
Internet Archive. I'll see if it's there.
And can now Gigan has a new superpower. He can make hurricanes.
The go-to of the flying kaiju.
Yes. And Chameleon is said to have a giant rotating saw.
That's something that Gigan has.
Well, on his belly.
Yeah.
Some sources say Godzilla can see Chameleon because he's a tetrachromat, which is a real thing, by the way.
Okay.
It's a real thing in nature. He can see more. He has more light receptors, so he can see a broader range of light. But the treatment says that the robot alerts Godzilla to its presence using sonar. I think Godzilla being a tetrachromat would be a little more interesting.
Yeah.
So here's the part that sells me on this. I mean, there's already some interesting stuff in here, but this is the part that sells me on this concept. And I want this to exist so bad. Godzilla fights Chameleon. So besides the fact that the humans think he turned on him, the humans, because they think he turned on him, hit Godzilla in the face with a chemical weapon missile that blinds him. The aliens rejoice that they've made Godzilla public enemy number 1 at this point. And then, like I said, Godzilla has to fight both Chameleon and Gigan at the end of the movie while blind. So he's basically Zatoichi. And if you don't know who Zatoichi is a Japanese film character. He's almost like a James Bond because he's been in a gazillion movies since the 60s. And he's a blind swordsman.
I didn't know about him.
There you go. There's a whole bunch. There's, like I said, there's like about as many Zatoichi movies as there are Bond movies. And apparently Godzilla is fighting them using sound. That's all that the script says. That's all the treatment, I should say, says.
I like that.
I want this to exist
so
much because of the whole idea of playing on the concept of Godzilla turning on the humans and they don't trust him anymore, so they're paying attention to continuity, and then he has to fight while blind at the end, and it's just so interesting. I want to see this. I really, really want to see this. And you know what's brilliant about it? I'm amazed that they didn't think that this could work, because they wouldn't have had to build another suit technically. Because Camellia Gong's is invisible.
Exactly.
They could have just recycled the Gigan suit. Why didn't this get made?
It's something that should. And it's also something where a little bit of it we got in Mechagodzilla. Like that's
the thing. No one is quite sure when this was put together. Yeah. None of the sources for it have dates on it, so they don't know if it was made before Mechagodzilla, which means some of it found their way into that movie, if it was made afterward, so they were just recycling some stuff.
So then, next up we have the Godzilla revival meeting of 1978. So just to provide some context, listeners, at this point, Godzilla was on hiatus. Terror of Mechagodzilla was his swan song. It wasn't officially like canceled or anything like that, but Japanese cinema was on a bit of rough times financially, like across the board. And as much as by this point in the Godzilla films, they were being made as cheaply as possible, that's not an insult, because like Terror of Mechagodzilla it's a very underrated Godzilla movie. I actually watched it recently. I was like, man, this is a great note for this era to go out on. And
it was actually my first Godzilla film and remains one of my favorites to this day.
To me, in a lot of ways, it feels like it's got some of that darker edge that the Heisei era does. And it's out of all the Showa. I know Jimmy corrected me earlier, so I'm just covering my bases. Out of all those other ones, this is to me the one that captures that kind of darker tone that the original had. Like, it's not quite there.
No,
they're very different films.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things in Terror that brings it full circle.
Exactly.
Because you have Akihiko Harada playing a scientist again, but this scientist is the villain, and he dies at the end. Spoiler warning. And there's a lot of thematic things that come back in Terror.
And Terror is to me it's a great one, but it's just to provide that context. So that ended in
75.
Okay,
75. Right. But Tomoyuki Tanaka wanted to bring Godzilla back at some point. The initial plan was to put Godzilla out to pasture for 10 years or so. Then they would try. But Tanaka, in the meantime, was trying to get more ideas for movies.
And it's something that's a thing that Toho does with Godzilla repeatedly. They'll hit a point and they'll be like, they'll hit a point and then they'll be like, you know what, it's time to take a break. And it's never fully like, hey, they're gone. But that's just to set this. So, because this is a list of several, one that we hinted at earlier, that just never got there in the interim between Terror of Mechagodzilla and what would eventually be Return of Godzilla, or as released in America or North America in 1985, Godzilla Returns. So these were stuff that were pitched in that gap. So this produced unmade concepts, including Godzilla versus the Devil. You heard me right. And Godzilla versus Gargantua. the later was made into an audio drama by Kaijusaurus.
Yeah. My notes will explain what that is in a second.
So it was held by Tanaka with Bono and Ken Tsunada from Toho and
Tsunoda.
And several outside critics. No one knows what exactly was discussed, but several unmade projects came from it, such as Godzilla, God's Angry Messenger. I dig that title a lot. It had aliens create Godzilla. Don't like that part. Had aliens create Godzilla by experimenting on dinosaurs, putting him in suspended animation, and he hatches from an egg in present day as the Last Judgment. Parts of that I like. Like Godzilla being this, this sounds a little bit more like the force of nature aspect, and that I dig.
Almost sounds like it's supposed to be like Godzilla is the embodiment of the wrath of God, like he's the Spectre or something.
I'm getting Gamera, Guardian of the Universe vibes a little bit. So that one color me intrigued.
Well, the thing is I think somebody was just like, that's such a great idea, because there's a lot of projects I think that came out of this meeting, and to a lesser extent, some of the projects we'll get into after this that were building off of that concept.
So then the next note has Ryu, and how do you pronounce his last name? Rio? I'm done, man. Rio Mitsuse, perfect. Rio Mitsuse, I got it. Wrote one draft where Godzilla and Nessie, yes, that's right, the Loch Ness monster Nessie, were created by aliens on Venus, of all places.
Calm down, Jimmy. Calm down. I know Venus triggers you, but that's okay.
And he emitted strange lights. Dinosaurs commit suicide upon hearing Godzilla roar. He also makes people in a village commit suicide. It also has Godzilla interacting with people in Atlantis and King Nimrod and the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. So it's this really dark film where Godzilla has apparently been appearing throughout the course of human history.
Yeah.
If people or basically anything living hears him, they kill themselves. I'm just, what?
Yeah. There's aspects of that I like, and then there's other aspects I don't.
I have a feeling some of that must have been Yoshimitsu Banno's influence, because it reminds me a bit of Prophecies of Nostradamus, which he wrote and was the second unit director on.
Right.
And that movie is banned, so have fun reading it.
Well, and also like the emitting of strange lights, it's making me think of 2019's King of the Monsters, where it's that kind of display where I'm like,
intimidation display. At least that made sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like that kind of thing that I enjoy. Or if it wasn't the committing suicide part, but if it was the freaking out and causing them to behave abnormally, then that I'm down for, because
it's a strangely Lovecraftian sort of idea, to be honest.
Yeah. It's, episodic and Kubrick-esque.
Yeah, this sounds like a Stanley Kubrick Godzilla movie. It really does.
Another draft starts in Stonehenge and features an all-consuming algae. I understand why that one didn't go. Godzilla versus algae.
I don't think it was versus algae. It was just another element of the story.
Yeah. This was supposedly shown to Henry G. Saperstein, who instead pitched Godzilla versus the Devil, which had Godzilla fight Satan himself, which some think might have been Godzilla versus Bagan.
You're going to hear about that critter a lot coming up. And, the most famous Toho monster that never got made.
Yep. World of Godzilla, man. His time to shine. Next up, we got Godzilla versus Gargantua. Was apparently another Saperstein idea that was pitched. It would have been a sequel to War of the Gargantuas featuring Godzilla.
Which, again, was made into an audio drama by Kaijusaurus.
There we go. And then Sekizawa contributed with a treatment called The Anger of Godzilla that would have had him resurrected in the infamous Suicide Forest.
Yeah, which Bex and I talked about in our episode on Rebirth of Mothra 3.
Yep, and
it's in GMK.
That forest has a lot of tragic history that unfortunately some mook on YouTube, who I refuse to name to not give him attention, did a disrespectful video in, so never mind that guy. He's apologized, and I hope it's genuine, but that forest has a lot of symbolism and a lot of tragedy, so it's a touchy thing to try to adapt, but if you're going to do it, you got to do it well. And I can understand that at that time, maybe not including it with Godzilla, that kind of makes sense. And then the final note we have here, and it's the note we're hopping out on because, listener, there are so many of these things that we're not going to crunch it in one. That does a disservice to you. It does a disservice to this material that was never made, and that's just utterly baffling, but also crazy interesting. So we're going to do a part 2 coming soon. But this final one was another pitch called The Godzilla, which, side tangent, how often is it now that when we get a reboot of something, it's the
The Suicide Squad?
The Suicide, or it's like, okay, it's a loose sequel, but like we're the good one, so it's The Suicide Squad, The Batman, The Wolverine. Like, so The Godzilla, which doesn't roll off the tongue, would have somehow tied into Noah's Ark. What?
Well, Godzilla told Noah to have 2 of every creature, so
God used Godzilla to cause the flood, maybe?
The flood? Why not?
It wouldn't surprise me if
Godzilla
at the end of
goes after the Ark and they have to fend him off.
At the end of the movie, like the Ark settled on Godzilla's dorsal fins, and that was the mountain they walked down.
Godzilla takes the Ark over to where it's supposed to be. I mean,
oh my gosh.
There is so much that is both awesome and terrible about that. All at
I
the
know.
same
On one
time.
hand, I'm like, never do this, but on the other hand, I'm like, I kind of want to see this. Like, I just want to see where this was going. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not a full.
It's like one of those things. I remember Linkara was said something like this when he was talking about a comic book that one of his viewers told him to review just for this, because which basically involved the Greek god showing up at Jesus's crucifixion and then taunting him, and then Jesus jumped off the cross and proceeded to kick all their butts.
Oh no.
And Linkara said, as a Christian, I find this both terrible and awesome.
Yeah. Oh man. Moving on. Well, and this, I'd be like, okay, maybe not even a comic. Like, just I need more details. Give me more details.
Yeah, there isn't a whole lot. There was a lot of stuff that came out of this. So
I'm interested, and I kind of want to, like, I want to know more about it.
I'm trying to figure out just Godzilla fighting Satan. I mean, there is a comic book series called Godzilla in Hell, but it's not quite this. But I don't know. But maybe Mephisto can say, hey, I'm going to, I don't know, take your son away because you don't have a wife. So, okay. Doggy!
Sorry, one sec. We're wrapping up now. We're going to do a part 2 next week. That's me.
Oh, Mrs. Cook.
Nathan says hi, hon. All right.
I don't remember your wife's name because I'm terrible.
Okay, it's okay. All right, so I think that's a good point to wrap it. Luna is also desperate for play, and I owe this puppy. So, dear listener, we will be back next week with part 2, where we're jumping into more recent of the Unmade. We're jumping into what's probably my bias era of Godzilla, the Heisei era. That was my gateway, and it's my favorite Godzilla design. And anyways,
Yes, Jimmy, I'm not looking forward to trying to convince the Canadian Air Force to let us fly that robot through here again. So
we'll make a deal. We'll make a deal.
Yeah,
Our
we'll make
Air
a
Force
deal.
isn't that big. Our Army isn't that big. It's like 6 guys drinking some Canada
Well,
Dry in a ice fishing with hockey sticks. Like,
yeah, I mean, given the exchange rate, if one of the airplanes in your Air Force crosses the U.S. border, it turns into like a drone or something, doesn't it? I mean,
our soldiers are keepers of the peace. Although when they do fight, they fight greatly. But that's a different topic for a different time. All right, so dear listener, thank you for listening. Be sure to check out the episodes that Nathan plugged on here, and we will also continue to be plugging next episode
yes.
when we come back with part 2 of Godzilla Unmade. Godzilla Unmade. Hope you guys enjoy, and God bless, my friends. Take care.
Sayonara.
Peace.